my name is Marley and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. So another month has passed. We are so close to the end of 2020. It's crazy. So as usual, I'm going to be doing my monthly reading wrap up for what I read in the month of October. This was certainly a thriller month for me, but honestly this whole year has been more of a thriller year for me, so can't be too surprised. It was also Halloween, so well, Halloween hasn't even happened yet because I'm filming this a couple days before, but you know, the Halloween vibes have been present. So for this month wrap up, I wanted to do things a little bit differently. Normally, I talk about the books in the order that I read them, but this month, I thought that I would talk about them in the order of the ones I liked the least to the ones I liked the most. Maybe that'll make it a little bit more interesting. I don't know. Also, a lot of the books that I read this month were in previous videos throughout the month, so I've already talked about them. I might mention those videos a lot and you should definitely go watch them. Another note before we get into it is this is the first month I didn't make notes on each book as I read them. So hopefully I can remember all of them and give a sufficient description and everything. We'll see. So for the very first book that I read in October, it was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And I read this book for a little challenge video I did where I tried to read books that were recommended for Libras, as I am a Libra. As Dorian Gray is a bit of a classic, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, but basically it's about this young, beautiful man named Dorian Gray who one day gets a portrait of himself done. Suddenly he is faced with the reality that he will no longer look this beautiful once he starts to age, and he starts to resent the painting of him and wish that the painting would age and not himself. And that's exactly what ends up happening. So it is very much about corruption and how people are so materialistic, or not even materialistic, but so very vain and obsessed with looking beautiful and looking young forever, which this was written in the 1800s, and those ideas are still relevant today, so that was really cool. However, as it was written so long ago, no offense Oscar Wilde, it was super boring for me and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I also listened to the audiobook, which I would not recommend. It did not help to keep my attention. It actually hindered it. So I would recommend reading the physical book if you read it. I wouldn't recommend reading it unless you're really into reading classic novels. I am not, so this is why this was my least favorite book of the month. The next book that I read in October was Sweetbitter by Stephanie Danler, and this was also for my reading books recommended for Libras video. That was not a super successful video. I ended up rating this 3 out of 5 stars. What it's about is this young woman who decides to move to New York, and she doesn't really have any major goals. She just wants to start her life and have a more exciting life in New York. So she ends up getting a serving job at this super high-end restaurant and learning how to become a server and learning all of the rules that come with it, you know, all of the table rules, learning about the different wines, being able to differentiate between them, all the food, stuff like that. And again, this had similar themes of corruption. Obviously being young and in New York and suddenly having all this money. Girl gets into some stuff. There's drug abuse, so I guess that's a bit a trigger warning, alcohol abuse, stuff like that. And the main character was not the most likable. A lot of the characters were not super likable. Yeah, by the end I just sort of felt a little unsatisfied, but I will say I thought the premise was super interesting, and the first half of the book I really enjoyed, and I overall did like the setting of being in this fancy restaurant and seeing that lifestyle, because I have had some serving experience, so I was able to relate to it, but I was also still learning a lot too. If you're into reading books about food and wine and stuff, and if you want to learn more about the service industry, maybe the dark side of it, then I actually would recommend this, but not the best. The next book that I'm going to talk about is The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra, Clare, and Wesley Chu. I did a full reading vlog and spoilery review on this book if you want to go watch that video if you've read it, because it's spoilery. Oh, and I have it here. Almost forgot. You might not recognize this cover. I actually changed it from this original cover. I just think that this one is prettier. As probably a lot of you guys are aware of the Shadowhunter world that Cassie has created, this is the second book in the Eldest Curses series that follows Magnus and Alex specifically, and this takes place right after City of Heavenly Fire and before the beginning of the Dark Artifices. And basically they have their son Max, they're living like a nice domestic life, and then what's her freaking name, Shin Young, and then Shin Young from the first book comes back into their life, stabs Magnus with a magical sword, and they have to go on a quest. Oh, and steals the Book of the White, as you can see. So they have to go on a quest to go get the Book of the White back and to try and save Magnus because he's been stabbed. Clary, Jay, Simon, Isabel all join them on this quest to Shanghai is where they go. I was really excited about this. Obviously, I love the Cassie Killer books. However, I will say this is probably one of my least favorites that I've read. As I really went off on in my review, I feel like you can really notice Cassandra Clare's absence and Wesley Chu's presence, and it's just not the same as reading her main series, and therefore I did not enjoy it that much, and I only gave it 3 stars. So if you're a major Shadowhunter fan, still read it. There's still some tidbits and things that you'll like, but keep in mind it's very different from the main series. All the characters are just not the same. They don't have that same sense of humor, and also the plot gets really crazy to the fact where you're like, this happened between TMI and TDA, and it's like world-ending stuff happening. It's just kind of weird thinking about that. I just kind of wish that it was like smaller level problems that were going on and seeing more of like the day-to-day life between Magnus and Alec rather than having this like huge, crazy greater demons plot. Honestly, I don't know if I explained that well, but moving on. The next book that I'll talk about is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Morena Garcia. I read this for my fall reading vlog where I read 3 thriller books. So I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. We're getting higher on the list here. Mexican Gothic is obviously a Gothic novel that follows Noemi in the 1950s, and her father receive a letter from her cousin saying that she is in trouble and asking to be saved. And the cousin, Catalina, I think her name was, is currently in the countryside in Mexico with her husband, her new husband. So Noemi gets sent to go check things out, see if the cousin's okay. And while she's there, she figures out there's some weird stuff going on here. The husband and his family is being very like suspicious, and Catalina is sick. She is trying to get her cousin help, but it's hard because like her husband is the one that has control over her life now. And then there are some weird things going on with the actual house. It's definitely like a creepy, I'll say haunted house kind of story, and it really escalates at the end. It gets super weird, super crazy. It is quite slow in the beginning, but I do encourage you to push through and get to that ending because it's a pretty good payoff. Another book I read for that vlog was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I read Riley's other book, Home Before Dark, earlier this year, and I was so pumped to read Lock Every Door, and I think that was my bad reading it after and having really high hopes because it did disappoint me slightly, and so it only got 4 out of 5 stars. I say only when like that's still a good rating, but I guess I was just expecting all his books to be 5s for me. But no matter, it was still really good and a very quick read. How he writes is great. It's a great match for me. Lock Every Door is about this woman who's had a very unfortunate life. A lot of tragedies have happened to her, and she's at a point where she has nowhere to live, no money, no boyfriend or family kind of thing. So she sees this ad in the paper to apartment sit for this very high-end apartment building called the Bartholomew, I think, in New York City, and they pay you a lot of money to basically just live in this apartment for a few months. So she obviously takes it, and immediately she starts to notice some red flags, like there are rules that you cannot stay away from the room for a night, you can't have any guests over, things like that. But she's desperate for this money, so she has to stay. Then other apartment sitters start to go missing, and she starts to investigate it and find out what is going on at the Bartholomew is it a hotel or apartment building? Whichever. And I really loved uncovering the mystery of this, having my little theories. I'll say I did pretty much guess what the twist was, which is why it was slightly disappointing, but still very enjoyable. Maybe you wouldn't guess it, so you should read it. And the third thriller book I read for that vlog was Little Monsters by Kara Thomas. This follows a teenage girl who recently moved in with her father's family, so with her, you know, stepmom, stepbrother, and half-sister. And she's been living there for a while. She has two very close friends. They like to make her sneak out. So they have her sneak out one day, and then her young sister ends up sneaking out with them, and they go to this haunted barn area that has a lot of ghost stories surrounding it, including the red woman who supposedly walks around there like covered in blood. I forget like the story behind it, but yeah. And they have a really creepy experience there that really shakes up all the girls, and then after, a lot of them are acting weird, and then the one girl, the one best friend, ends up disappearing. And so then it's a mystery of where did she go? Was she kidnapped? Was she killed? Did she just run away? Also, was the red woman involved, right? Like, is it paranormal? And I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Also, it's just one of those books where you can just theorize constantly about what happened and have all your little suspects, and they get crossed off the list. I just love YA thrillers. I love adult thrillers. I love YA thrillers. They're both great. I'm really having a moment with them right now. Then we get to my 5-star reads, which start with The Trials of Apollo final book, The Tower of Nero. I also did a full reading vlog and spoilery review for this, so go check that out if you want to hear all the details about this. But as you guys probably know, this is the final book in the Trials of Apollo series by Riordan, and the last book in the Percy Jackson universe for the moment. I'm holding out hope that there will be more one day. But anyways, Apollo has to finally defeat Nero along with Python, his like mortal enemy. And the plot is like pretty straightforward with that. Like, that's the main goal for our characters, Apollo and Meg. And then we see a lot of our characters from the previous books, as always, popping in here. In this one specifically, we see Nico, we see Rachel Elizabeth there, and it was honestly such a good time. I love these books. Obviously, the humor was on point in this. The relationships are great, especially between Apollo and his kids, Apollo and Meg. You get to see Nico and Will's relationship, and yeah, you just really find out what happens with all of our little heroes. So it's a must read if you are invested in this series and this universe, and it definitely was an emotional read too. I mostly give it 5 out of 5 because the way it tugged at my heartstrings at moments. It might actually be a bit lower than that if I'm being honest, but whatever. I just gave it 5 out of 5 because I feel like that's what Rick deserves. And the final book that I read this month, and I think like the only book that I didn't read in a reading vlog, which ended up being my favorite, was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This book's definitely gotten some hype, so I'm sure you've seen it, but let me just hype it up again for you. It was amazing. I started it one night. I'm like, sure, we'll start this. I read it in 4 hours. Like, I did not stop reading. It was like watching a movie. Like, I just, like, I read the whole thing in one sitting. And it's amazing. Unfortunately, because I read it so quick, I feel like the details are already slipping from my mind. Last night, I was like, wait, who did it? Like, who was the killer? I was having a hard time remembering. So we gotta talk about it before I completely forget. But this follows our main character, Pippa, or Pip. Love that. And she is a senior in high school, and for her main like senior project, she takes on the challenge of trying to find out who really killed this girl. Who was the girl? I forget. Andy Bell. So she was murdered like a few years ago. She was older than Pip. The person who got blamed for it all those years ago was a boy named Sal Singh, and that was Andy's boyfriend. But Pip does not think it's him because she knew Sal, and he was a really sweet guy, and she's like, he could not have killed her. So she starts to uncover the truth behind who killed Andy. Again, classic like YA thriller where like who did it, we have all our suspects we're going through. I will say one of my main suspects didn't do it, but there was like, it was one of those ones where you get your twist but then you get another one, and that one I wasn't expecting as much. But yeah, love this. Love the characters such as Pip. There's even a romance in it, which was actually very cute. I just loved the journey. I loved the whole thing. I don't know what else to say. You have to read this. 100%. I think there's a second book that's out. I don't know if it's out yet. Like, what a fake fan I am. But I'm pretty sure the second one is either out or coming out, and I cannot wait. Maybe I'll actually do a reading vlog for that one, because I'm kind of sad I didn't like vlog my reactions during this, because I just literally read it in one night. So obviously that was a 5 out of 5. So there we have it. That is my book wrap up for October. Definitely got into the Halloween spooky vibes. I mostly read thrillers, as you just saw. Probably need to take a break from that. Thank you guys for watching. If you made it this far, please subscribe for more videos and like and comment, of course. I hope you guys had a great Halloween, and I'll just see you in my next video. Bye.